Hi, kindergarten students. It's Mrs. Belatesh, and I'm so glad to be with you today. I hope you had fun playing with snails. I love snails. They're such an interesting animal. And we don't really think of snails as animals sometimes, right? But they are an animal. Today, we're going to look at another really interesting animal, a worm. I love worms just like I love snails. Worms are so good for the earth. They help recycle materials and turn the dead plants back into good nutrients for the soil. So let's take a look at some worms. Here are some wonderful, wonderful worms. I think they're so awesome. So one of the things that's really cool about worms, do you see all those little lines on the worm? Those are segments. Oh, look how he stretches and moves. So a worm is just a long, long muscle, little segments of muscles, and they can stretch and move, and that's how they move around. Worms have to be kept moist. But if they're too wet, that's not good for them either. But they like to stay moist. They breathe through their skin. So they have to have a little bit of moisture so they can breathe, but too much moisture and they'll drown. Boy, this little worm is a fast little guy. There is a really small worm and a medium-sized worm
and a big worm.
Remember how I said snails can only go one direction? Worms can go forwards or backwards. See, now it's going the other direction. They can move both frontwards and backwards. Worms have a little bit of slime on their bodies, and that helps them move. Slime helps them tunnel through the soil. Worms have 10 hearts. They have 5 pairs of hearts. Worms don't have a brain. They have a nerve that goes along their body that tells them what they sense. Remember we talked about our senses? But they don't have a brain. What do worms need so they can live? Well, as I said, they need to stay moist. They need water. They need some food, and they are really good at recycling things. They eat dead plants. They eat leaves that are from the ground. They're very good about recycling materials. Worms need a place to live, so they need a little shelter, and they love to live in the dark ground. They make tunnels in the ground, and they need some oxygen. Worms breathe through their skin, so they don't have lungs. The air goes in and out right through their skin. I love to hold worms and feel them stretch and move on my skin. They're kind of ticklish. Get back up there, little worm. Look at him stretching and trying to figure out. He's using his nerve to investigate, to stretch and feel. Worms don't have any eyes. Worms don't have any nose, but they do feel the environment. Worms are pretty amazing. I hope that you guys got to have a little bit of time to play with some worms. Don't be worried about them. They can't hurt you, and they're amazing animals. And when we learn about animals, we see how amazing they are and how important they are to our environment. Let's take out your science notebook, and we're going to turn to page 10. I know there's like 3 pages all about worms. We only have time to do 1 page. If you want to do some more things with worms, you can, but as a class, we're only going to do page 10. The question is, what do red worms need to live? So what did I say that worms need to live? They need to stay wet, right? So they need water. They need to breathe. How do worms breathe? Through their skin. So they need air. Worms need food, right? But one of the great things about worms is that they eat dead plants. So they recycle material. So worms need food and they need a place to live. Worms need shelter. So I'm going to draw a picture of a worm and then I'm going to write those 4 things. First, I'm going to draw a long worm. There, I drew a long, skinny worm. Remember, worms have segments, so I'm going to draw some lines on my worm. There we go. I'm showing the segments. Do worms have eyes? Nope. Do worms have a nose? Nope. Worms only can sense or feel their environment. Now, I'm going to color my worm and then I'm going to write the 4 things that worms need to live. I colored my worm and I used both a pink and a brown. And then I wrote the 4 things that worms need to live. Worms need water. Worms need food. Worms need air. And worms need shelter. You guys have done a terrific job today. Keep doing such good work. I'm so proud of you. I'll see you next week, kindergartners.